Hollywood spent $500 million in 1997 making movies that nobody wanted to see. That's not an exaggeration. 15 films from major studios collectively lost more money in a single year than most countries spend on their entire film industries. And some of these disasters came from the biggest stars on the planet. Here are the 15 biggest box office catastrophes of 1997 and the wild stories behind each one. Kull the Conqueror might be the most obscure film on this list, but its origin story is fascinating. Universal spent $30 million on this sword and sorcery adventure starring Kevin Sorbo. It made just $6.3 million worldwide. That's a return of about 21 cents for every dollar invested, which is honestly hard to even comprehend. But here's what makes this interesting. The film was originally supposed to be Conan the Conqueror, the third Arnold Schwarzenegger Conan movie. When Arnold passed, Universal scrambled to rewrite everything around a lesser-known character from the same author. They signed Sorbo, who was riding high from TV's Hercules, to a 3-picture deal. That deal collapsed after this bombed. The screenwriter later called his own movie a disaster and blamed Sorbo for insisting on a family-friendly rating that gutted the adult source material. Sometimes the talent knows best. Sometimes they really don't. 187 cost somewhere between $20 and $23 million. It made $5.7 million. Warner Brothers released it in July 1997, right in the middle of summer blockbuster season, competing against Men in Black and Air Force One, a grim drama about school troubles against popcorn movies. Someone approved that release date, which is insane when you think about it. The film starred Samuel L. Jackson in what was technically his first top-billed leading role in a major studio picture. This was after Pulp Fiction, after Jurassic Park, after Die Hard with a Vengeance. And this was his first lead. It flopped hard at the time. But here's the twist. Jackson himself has repeatedly called this one of his most underrated films. He listed it among his top 5 favorites on late-night television. In 2023, the Museum of Modern Art actually screened it as part of a Jackson tribute series. Audiences rate it way higher than critics. Sometimes the market just gets it wrong. Steel might be the single worst performing superhero film in major studio history. Warner Brothers spent somewhere between $16 and $23 million on a DC Comics adaptation starring Shaquille O'Neal. It grossed $1.7 million total. Not domestically, total. It opened at number 16 its first weekend. Warner Brothers didn't even bother releasing it internationally. They just sent it straight to video overseas. Here's what happened behind the scenes. The director wanted Wesley Snipes for the lead. Studio executives believed Shaq would sell more toys. A Warner Brothers executive literally told the director they were convinced we would sell more toys with Shaq's name. The director responded that they wouldn't sell a single toy if the movie didn't even open. He was right. Shaq, who had just signed a $121 million Lakers contract, deferred most of his salary for back-end points and merchandise. He made about $200,000 up front. The armor they built for him visibly flexed like rubber throughout the film. Warner Brothers declined to screen it for critics. This was the last DC movie released until Catwoman in 2004, 7 years of silence. That's the legacy. Turbo, a Power Rangers movie, had a budget of just $8 million, which sounds modest until you realize the first Power Rangers film had a $15 million budget and made $66 million worldwide. This sequel made $9.6 million total. After theater cuts, the studio got back about half that. The first film was a modest success. This one was embarrassing. The production introduced a child Blue Ranger to replace a fan-favorite character, which alienated the core audience. It launched the same month as the Star Wars Special Edition re-releases, making its bargain basement effects look even more primitive. One genuinely funny detail: when the villain calls the original series villain Rita Repulsa for advice on defeating the Rangers, Rita's response is a single word: run. The film resulted in a 20-year gap before another Power Rangers theatrical release. 20 years from one bad movie. McHale's Navy is one of the purest examples of a vanity deal gone wrong. Universal spent $42 million on this Tom Arnold military comedy. It grossed $4.5 million worldwide. One industry analyst noted that the studio's share barely covered the cost of striking release prints. It holds a 3% on Rotten Tomatoes. 3%. But the real story isn't about Tom Arnold. It's about how this movie got made. When Seagram bought Universal in 1995, the outgoing studio head received an extraordinary arrangement. His production company could greenlight multiple movies per year at budgets up to $40 million without Universal's approval. This deal reportedly existed because Universal desperately needed Steven Spielberg to direct a sequel, and this arrangement was the price. McHale's Navy was greenlit through this deal. His son actually told the press that in terms of production values, it would look like the Power Rangers movie. That's not a selling point. That's a warning. 2 months after the film's release, Universal wrote him a massive check and ended the relationship permanently. Fire Down Below effectively ended Steven Seagal's theatrical career. Warner Brothers spent an estimated $60 million on this environmental action thriller. It grossed somewhere between 20 and 24 million worldwide. The studio didn't screen it for critics. They released it in September, the post-Labor Day dumping ground. They knew what they had. The film was the final installment of a 4-picture deal Seagal signed with Warner Bros. In 1993. He was coming off Under Siege and seemed like a bankable action star. The screenplay was originally attached to Bruce Willis and was converted into a Seagal vehicle. Warner Bros. Heavily re-edited the finished film, removing several expensive action sequences, including the original opening. The result earned Razzie nominations for Worst Actor and something called Worst Screen Couple, which was Seagal and his guitar. After this bombed, Seagal's next film never received a theatrical release. He was essentially banished to direct-to-video for years. He briefly resurfaced in 2001 before returning to video permanently. Seagal himself has said this is one of his favorite films. I don't know if that's confidence or delusion. Excess Baggage is a cautionary tale about what happens when Hollywood destroys its own creations. After the massive success of Clueless, 18-year-old Alicia Silverstone became the industry's hottest commodity. Columbia Pictures signed her to a $10 million deal for 2 films plus a production company. This was supposed to be her coronation. Instead, it was her collapse. The film cost about $20 million and grossed just under $17 million worldwide. The original screenplay won the very first Austin Film Festival screenplay competition, then underwent extensive rewrites by an extraordinary roster including Aaron Sorkin. Production was plagued by reported shouting matches between Silverstone and the director. The producer quit mid-production. The film was delayed from Christmas 1996 due to disastrous test screenings. Meanwhile, media outlets relentlessly criticized Silverstone's appearance, creating a toxic narrative that compounded when Batman and Robin bombed 2 months earlier. Her second Sony picture never materialized. She never had another studio film built around her name. The trajectory from $10 million deal to career obscurity remains one of the starkest in 1990s Hollywood. The director never directed another feature film. The only survivor was Benicio del Toro, who went on to win an Oscar 3 years later. Mr. Magoo starred Leslie Nielsen and cost Disney $30 million. It made about $29 million worldwide, which sounds close until you factor in marketing costs. The real loss was probably north of $20 million, but the financial damage wasn't even the worst part. The National Federation of the Blind organized protests at theaters during the film's release. Disney had to add a disclaimer before the closing credits stating the character wasn't intended as an accurate portrayal of visual impairment. On the review show Siskel and Ebert, both critics said the disclaimer was funnier than anything in the movie. Roger Ebert's review became legendary. He wrote, "Mr. Magoo is transcendently bad. It soars above ordinary badness as the eagle outreaches the fly. There is not a laugh in it. Not one. I counted." The film was directed by Hong Kong action filmmaker Stanley Tong, who never directed another English-language film. He went back to Hong Kong permanently. At least he got out. An American Werewolf in Paris cost $25 million to make a sequel to John Landis's beloved 1981 classic. It grossed about $27 million, which sounds like a win until you realize studios only keep about half of box office revenue. After marketing, this lost somewhere between $15 and $25 million. It holds a 6% on Rotten Tomatoes. The development history was nightmarish. Landis himself wrote an initial draft connecting to the original film's characters. After Landis, writer after writer was brought in. According to the Writers Guild, up to 12 writers touched the script. That's a death sentence for any film's coherence. The CGI effects were universally savaged as looking like a cartoon. The original film won an Oscar for its groundbreaking practical effects. This sequel couldn't even manage competent digital ones. Julie Delpy admitted she only took the role to pay her rent. Landis delivered a blunt verdict. I was really disappointed when I saw that film. I thought it was lousy. When the original creator says that about a sequel, you know it's bad. Event Horizon cost $60 million and grossed somewhere between 42 and 47 million worldwide. Paramount announced an unspecified but very large write-off. One analysis estimates inflation-adjusted losses of over $120 million. It earned a D+ cinema score, which caused a brutal second weekend collapse. By every metric, this was a disaster. But here's what nobody expected. Director Paul W.S. Anderson turned down both Mortal Kombat Annihilation and the X-Men franchise to make this film. When Titanic's release was pushed, Paramount suddenly needed a summer hit and imposed a 6-week post-production schedule. Anderson was entitled to 10 weeks under Guild standards. The studio demanded extensive cuts, and over 30 minutes were removed. The deleted footage was stored on VHS tapes and sent to a salt mine in Transylvania, where it deteriorated beyond repair. When the DVD became a surprise hit and Paramount wanted a director's cut, the footage was gone. Today, Event Horizon is one of the most celebrated cult classics of the 1990s. Its reputation has undergone a complete reversal. It appears on lists of the best horror films ever made and is widely cited as an influence on video game franchises. Amazon has been developing a TV series based on the property. Sometimes the market doesn't just get it wrong initially, sometimes it gets it exactly backwards. Father's Day cost $85 million for a comedy. That number makes no sense until you learn that most of it went to star salaries. Robin Williams, Billy Crystal, director Ivan Reitman. The entire package was assembled by a talent agency who called Warner Brothers and said, "We have Williams and Crystal and Reitman." The studio greenlit it without reading a script. They assumed star power was enough. The film grossed just over $35 million worldwide. An unnamed Warner Brothers executive later revealed, "We don't scrutinize the production. When we saw the movie, it took the wind out of us. We kept reshooting and enhancing, but you can't fix something that's bad." Here's a choice detail. A film called Father's Day opened on Mother's Day weekend. It lost to The Fifth Element. One critic wrote that it was beyond my comprehension how a motion picture with so much talent can be such a complete waste of time. No cult following or critical reassessment has ever materialized. Some disasters stay disasters. Volcano had a budget that started at $70 million and ballooned to around $90 to $100 million due to a bitter rivalry with Universal's competing Dante's Peak. Both studios engaged in aggressive scheduling warfare. Fox falsely announced filming was complete while cameras were still rolling. Universal responded by rushing their film to February with expensive ad campaigns. Volcano grossed about $123 million worldwide, which sounds profitable until you learn that Fox announced a confirmed $40 million write-down. After theater cuts, the studio saw roughly $67 million returned, which one analyst noted would not even cover global marketing expenses. They built an 80% full-scale replica of Wilshire Boulevard in Torrance, California, one of the largest sets ever constructed in the United States. For a movie that still lost $40 million, Volcano and Speed 2 together were responsible for a $119 million quarterly loss at Fox's film division. Sometimes you can build the biggest set in history and still not build a hit. Speed 2, Cruise Control had a budget that spiraled to an estimated $160 million. It grossed about $164 million worldwide. That sounds like a break even until you learn that Fox took a write-down of approximately $70 million. That's the largest confirmed single film loss of 1997. It holds a 4% on Rotten Tomatoes. Keanu Reeves turned down $11 to $12 million to reprise his role. He explained on talk shows, "An ocean liner? A cruise ship is even slower than a bus. I was just like, I love you guys, but I just can't do it." Fox effectively blacklisted Reeves for a decade. He didn't work with them again until 2008. History proved him spectacularly right. Sandra Bullock initially refused but changed her mind in exchange for Fox funding another film. She has never stopped expressing regret. She called it the biggest piece of crap ever made. In 2023, she told an interviewer, "I have one film no one came around to, and I'm still embarrassed I was in. It's called Speed 2. Jason Patric used his entire salary to finance an independent drama because he was so embarrassed by what he'd made. The climactic crash sequence alone cost $25 million. nearly the entire budget of the original Speed, for one sequence. Kevin Costner directed and starred in The Postman on an $80 million budget. Released Christmas Day, 1997, directly against Titanic, it debuted in 9th place. It grossed just under $18 million domestically. After theater cuts, Warner Brothers received about $15 million back, far below even their advertising costs. Despite disastrous test screenings, Costner refused the studio's appeals to cut the film's 3-hour runtime. The parallels to his previous disaster Waterworld were impossible to ignore. Entertainment Weekly called it Ego Unchained. The film ends with a statue of Costner's character being unveiled. Critics seized on this as the ultimate symbol of vanity filmmaking. The Postman won all 5 Golden Raspberry Awards it was nominated for: Worst Picture, Worst Director, Worst Actor, Worst Screenplay, and Worst Song. It was the first film to sweep every Razzie category it entered. Here's the twist, though. Co-writer Brian Helgeland simultaneously won the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay for L.A. Confidential. He became only the second person in history to win both an Oscar and a Razzie in the same year. Costner took 6 years to direct again. He eventually rehabilitated his image through television decades later. Some comebacks just take a while. Batman and Robin cost somewhere between $125 and $160 million to produce, with an additional $125 million in marketing. George Clooney himself has cited the higher production figure. Combined costs exceeded $285 million. The film grossed $238 million worldwide. Those numbers might sound respectable until you realize it was a massive collapse from the previous film's $336 million. Warner Brothers mandated that the film be more toyetic. Toy companies were included in pre-production meetings and influenced concept art. Mr. Freeze's blaster was specifically designed by toy manufacturers. Arnold Schwarzenegger earned $25 million to play Mr. Freeze. He delivered 27 ice-related puns. The infamous nipple suit was created by the costume designer, who said in an interview, "Such a sophisticated world we live in where 2 pieces of rubber, the size of erasers on old pencils, can be an issue." Clooney's apologies have become legendary. He has said he's disinvited from Comic-Con for 20 years because of this film. He reportedly offers to refund people who saw it. Director Joel Schumacher apologized publicly before passing in 2020. "Look, I apologize. I want to apologize to every fan that was disappointed. After Batman and Robin, I was scum. It was like I had committed an unforgivable act." But here's the paradox. Batman and Robin ended the live-action Batman franchise for 8 years. The planned sequel was canceled immediately, but this forced Warner Brothers to reboot with a serious tone, leading to Christopher Nolan's trilogy, which is widely considered among the greatest superhero films ever made. Batman and Robin has been called secretly the best thing that happened to DC. The nipple suit was recently auctioned with a $40,000 opening bid. Sometimes the worst disasters create the best opportunities. You just have to wait 8 years to see them. 15 films, roughly $500 million in losses. Careers ended, franchises destroyed, and studios left scrambling to explain their decisions to shareholders. But perhaps the strangest lesson from 1997 is that the market doesn't always know what it's rejecting. Event Horizon became a masterpiece. Batman and Robin forced a creative renaissance, and Keanu Reeves, who Hollywood punished for saying no to a cruise ship movie, ended up looking like the smartest person in the room. Sometimes the bombs create the best stories.